afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Seed Speaks. This is a video series brought to you by Seed World Group. My name is Rebecca Carmeli Peslak, and I am the digital media producer for Seed World Group. Today, we are talking about how has tech driven farmers forward. Technology is constantly evolving and creating solutions to problems that were at one point unsolvable. In the ag sector, technology is utilized in a variety of ways. Farmers and growers also use technology in many different ways, and the impact it has on producing is shaping the future. Agtech has helped allow for farming in challenging conditions that were once unfarmable. Adapting and taking on new technology can pose a different type of challenge. Do the benefits outweigh the challenges? Today, I am joined by 4 experts to discuss how technology is driving farmers forward. Joseph Byram, Daniel Corey, Harley Jansen, and Chris Patterson. Thank you all so much for joining me today and bringing your expertise to Seed Speaks. Joseph, could you briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. By background, I'm a quantitative geneticist, spent my career, actively working in the biotech space, and more recently, I've moved into running venture capital and hedge fund space and a CTO of a AI startup.
Great. Thank you so much, Joseph. Daniel, could you also briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Certainly. Thank you for welcoming me here. I'm Daniel Corey, University of Maine graduate in plants and soils. I've got a early generation seed farm in northern Maine, and I also have a table stock operation in Florida. I guess that'll cover it.
Thanks, Daniel. Harley, could you please also introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. My name is Harley Jansen. I lead the product and operations for AGI Digital, so Ag Growth International's digital business unit. And I also farm in central Iowa, corn and soybeans with my dad and brother on a multi-generational farm.
Thanks, Harley. And Chris, an introduction, please.
Sure. I'm up in Calgary, Alberta, and it looks kind of just like it does in the photo behind me where I'm sitting right now. So I grew up on a farm in Saskatchewan and have worked in agribusiness my whole career, generally with farmer-facing businesses. Led me into the tech side of farming, and most recently I was leading the Zarvio digital farming platform for Bayer, and then later with BASF. And about a year ago, I decided to leave the corporate world and get into investing. I've got a team, we're Tallgrass Ventures, and we invest in very early stage ag tech in both the beef sector and the crop sector.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, all 4 of you, for being on today. Chris, I'll have you take the first question. It's a broad one. What is ag tech?
Yeah, it's a question that gets asked a lot, actually. And I was just at an event here just last week, and that was the first question there too. I think there is no right answer to that. It can be very broad and it can be very focused depending on your audience. And so I tried something fun just because it was the theme of the day. Went to ChatGPT and said, "What is ag tech?" And it came back with 6-point answers, and it was precision ag, smart farming, vertical farming, biotech, robotics and automation, and software. So I think that was a pretty good list of what a lot of people would call ag tech. I'm involved with some companies, that would consider, chemistry also in the ag tech sector. So that's up to everybody's definition. So I'll take the easy way and just say it's flexible.
Sure. Anybody want to add on to that? What is ag tech?
Maybe the only thing I'd say is that
I would think anything.
It's a little bit of a constant pursuit of continuous improvement. It's in areas of things that we, traditionally classify as technology, but it's also simple things like I have a lot of remote visibility through my cell phone to things like my bank account. Having that same remote visibility to things like my grain bin is very much a part of that ag tech space.
Definitely. Dan, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, anything that advances agriculture, it's ever changing. As he said, we got technology on the phones that can monitor your irrigation systems. They can monitor our storages. We can monitor our tractors at their location and the times they're running. It's forever changing. It's phenomenal what we got coming in front of us.
Totally. Well, Dan, I'll give the next question to you then. Where do you feel technology has benefited the agriculture and seed sectors the most?
As of an older in vitro tissue culture facility and variety development program, probably genetics is our big portrayer in our advancement of agriculture. New varieties that yield better, that are disease resistant, that store better, that meet all the attributes of a McCain food French fry or Frito-Lay chip potato, or flavor for table stock growers. So that is our big focus because we are into varieties and variety development.
Definitely. Joseph, how do you think ag tech can be used to solve some of the biggest problems that farmers are facing today?
Well, that is a great question. The way I see it moving from, technology, if you look at the last 20 years, has been really great at solving broad scale problems. If you look at the impact of technology like Roundup Ready, BT, they can go across many, many acres. As we look into the future, I think it's more and more going to be about solving those very specialized idiosyncratic problems. Now, not that there aren't large problems out there to solve, but it's kind of those small tactical, high impact solutions like where to replant, where's the disease, where are the emergence issues, how and when to market my grain. And maybe said differently, if you view the farmer as a complex system, okay, I mean, if you just look at the diversity and complexity of what a farmer has to deal with every day, it's actually quite staggering. And if you compare to that how a traditional business works, I mean, you have many things, segregated out into different business units and highly specialized people. And what the grower's having to deal with is really diverse. It's complex. It's emergent. And if you just think about that cognitive load that's on a farmer every day, it's actually quite extraordinary. And I view that as kind of the next big opportunity. That grower has to be an agronomist. It has to be a technologist. It has to be a CFO. It has to be a grain trader. And I think, the solutions going forward are going to be, I think a good analogy is if you look at, think about a fighter cockpit. Okay. If you're sitting in an F-22 or an F-35, the amount of information coming at a pilot at any given second is extraordinary. And the systems to manage that complexity, is what makes those platforms successful. And I would argue if the complexity and diversity that a grower has to deal with is not much different than what a modern fighter pilot has to deal with. So I think therein lies the opportunity and the challenge. And I think I just build on that is these how do you make a grower a very successful general manager of these complex systems? And the fourth bold I would say is it may not sound sexy, but I mean you have a lot of social and political things facing agriculture that growers have typically not had to deal with. And solutions that allow them to get their voice and their views out there are going to be more and more important. I think these social and political dynamics in the landscape are changing. They're changing fast. And little solutions, they may not be complex, but giving growers a really important voice to be heard across a broad spectrum, I think is going to be really critical and very impactful. Then the last one I would just add is, things that unleash the innovation and entrepreneurial spirit of the grower. I think most people, certainly on this discussion are old enough to kind of remember, one of the best things opening up a farm magazine was kind of, the entrepreneurial things that a grower did to their equipment or on their farm. And, I think, there's a lot of opportunity there to unleash it.
Definitely. Did anybody else want to add anything?
I can add. So I would say that labor and the baby boomers retiring and trend towards urbanization is probably the number one driver right now behind the adoption of technology. That there's a kind of a continuum that goes from how can the technology augment what the farmer is able to do, whether it's the stuff that Joseph was just talking about in terms of processing more data, more information, and making better decisions and stuff, the decision support side of it. But it's very quickly going to lead right into how can one person accomplish more actual stuff in the field. So, augment not only the decision making, but what actually happens. And that's going to lead right through to automation. So that continuum I'm talking about is from augmentation to full autonomous. So that's, as an investment thesis, that's what we're looking at is we're into a company called Paqueta, which is like lifetime tissue testing, Vivid, which is like every apple in the orchard has a unique identity and gets managed, the optimization. One cup is on the beef side, but it's all stuff on how can one person accomplish way more tasks in a day without labor. So that's how I think the answer to that question is, how can ag tech solve the biggest problems? It's going to be around augmentation and then full autonomous.
Definitely. Harley, I'll direct the next question to you. Do you think the agriculture and seed sectors are utilizing enough technology to their benefit? And where do you see potential for more utilization?
Yeah, I think that's a good question as well. I think it's easy to say, well, more technology is always better, or that we could do those things. But I think maybe there's one paradigm that I think sometimes exists, and I'd love to see broken a bit. And it's often said that, or it's been said that farmers are not tech adverse. They're just very tech impatient. And if I think about our family farm, I'd agree with that as well, that the willingness to try or adopt a biotech trait, a different chemistry formulations on the input side, things like technology on equipment, as well as things that we do, that sensors in grain bins, and that help us automate conditioning of grain and monitoring of grain. All those things were adopted really quickly. And it's more been an issue of typically people that will adopt early are also okay with that bleeding edge bugs and issues and challenges, and they kind of think they're fun. But as a couple of the panelists have stated, we asked farmers to be very much a general manager, as well as do it with less labor and less access to labor. So I think what I would say relative to this question is that it's more about, are you applying the right technology in the right spot? And how do you, as a farm, how do we as industry that's bringing technology to farms, how do we do a better job of those applications, those point solutions for specific problems, and present those in a way more efficiently? And I think when that happens, naturally more technology comes into place.
Definitely. Did anybody else want to add anything there? Well, Chris, I'll direct the next one to you. How do you see technology moving the industry forward, and where do you see that technology advancing next?
Yeah, I think I kind of alluded to it earlier, but how do you see technology moving the industry forward? I think it's going to be around the question of labor. So I think right now a lot of the technologies that I deal with are focused on better information, better granularity at decision making. So instead of managing the decisions across a whole field, pretty soon it's field zones, and then it's one plant at a time, and pretty soon it's it's not the precision application of products that might be a laser beam or something, or a biotech product. So there's a continuum there of the technologies that are going to help with our traditional problems of diseases and pests and higher yields and nutrient deficiencies and stuff. But I think that's moving along. Probably the biggest challenge is just the compatibility issues. So getting all this stuff to work, getting it installed, getting the onboarding issues. Data entry is a big challenge. But I think those things are being solved. So we're seeing lots of progress in terms of automated data entry through sensors and through satellites and different angles, equipment sensors and all sorts of different ways where nobody has to sit in front of a keyboard. So better granularity. And then I'd say the continuum is where it's moving very quickly is now into the, as I said before, the labor shortage. So whether it's an autonomous ground rig or driving your existing tractor autonomously, or whether it's an autonomous spray drone, or whether it's wading into a herd of 800 cattle and only having to look at the 3 that are highlighted on your iPad from their behavior analytics. So those are all examples of where I think it's headed next. So granularity or more precise decision making, and then into the labor thing. So.
Definitely, and that's very interesting. Daniel, what is the biggest issue from 10 or maybe 20 years ago you see farmers and growers being able to now conquer because of technological advances?
Disease site-specific management, I think, precision ag has been a fantastic upgrade for us. We can manage fields now. We're just as Chris alluded to, right down to the plant now. This technology, the yields have just been driven forward with this new technology of site-specific soil testing, moisture meters, irrigation systems, autonomous tractors. It's just been phenomenal. The yield differences we're getting, the planters, the precision that these planters can do now. Monitoring stands and yield increases with these stand improvements. So equipment and technology through genetics, equipment, site-specific soil testing, satellite imagery. It's phenomenal what it's done in the last 20 years.
Harley, I believe you're also in the field quite a bit. Do you have any other issues that you've seen pretty much solved because of technology advancing?
Well, I think I think the word productivity comes to mind, and I think Dan's sharing that. He's giving examples of significant productivity gains, and whether that is through the inputs and disease management, or whether that's through acres per hour. That I watched the little counter on the tractor go as we're going to start side dressing corn in the next day or two, and so I think those productivity gains are huge. It has allowed us to operate with less labor, which is continuing to be a problem, and it's some of those gains are also allowing me, who works off-site has needs off-farm income, to still participate in the family farm because of remote visibility and because of the ability to remotely monitor and even start taking action. And as we move people through that continuum of remote visibility into remote control elements and even into elements of automation at first I just can view my grain bins from a distance, then I can turn the fans on and off when I need to. And now I allow the algorithms to do it based on, the temperature and moisture outside. And so I think those gains in the last 10 to 20 years, not only are they impactful from a productivity standpoint, but they allow, people like myself to stay engaged in a family business.
That's great. I want to take this conversation one step further. So, Joseph, how do you think that new technology impacts the consumer?
I'd simply say price, safety, and choice. Okay, it allows the producer to economically and productivity, to produce things at a price point that are inclusive to everyone. Safety becomes a greater and greater concern. And the wonderful thing about technology is it brings more transparency to that, and there's huge regulatory focus on that. That's a great thing. In choice, just take the improvements in genetics and biotech. I mean, that actually allows, if the consumer wants the choice, the tools an opportunity to bring those to the table are significantly greater than they were if you look back 20 years ago. So I think, the future on that, just across the board, with those three elements, are actually extremely, they're really exciting to think about.
Good.
Definitely. Chris, where do you think farmers and growers are looking for a solution and technology is lacking in that area?
We're on a cusp here where a lot of these problems are being solved now. I think probably the number one barrier to a lot of the tech adoption has just been the whole process of getting it set up. Famous saying is always logistics trumps agronomy. So the technology exists. The time and the hassle involved with adopting that technology is the challenge. So whether it's data entry and all the setup time, or whether it's the actual compatibility between different suites of technology, or whether it's the companies that just don't do a good job of onboarding and making sure everybody's comfortable with everything, those are the issues right now that is slowing adoption. So when I think of why don't farmers adopt sooner, and what do they wish they could do? Sometimes that stuff exists and it's intimidating, and they've heard feedback from neighbors and stuff that says, "Oh, I tried that. It takes you a year or two to get it functional." So that's where farmers are looking for right now, is for stuff that's already been validated, but to get it functional on their farm is a whole nother level.
Yeah, and I think that that's a little that impatience that I was talking about. There's a desire for it to work now and a need for it to work now. And so one of the things we continue to focus on is passive data collection. How do I have stuff that I don't have to input data in? We use smart sensors and IoT type devices to passively collect what information might be needed downstream for site specific decision making, or to fulfill a requirement to gain a premium or something like that. And so I think that's another element of that we're gaining is in that space of IoT sensors.
Yeah. Right, Rebecca. If I could, maybe kind of come at this from a different angle.
Of course.
And I agree with everything that's been said. But I mean, if you look at it through the lens of artificial intelligence, and maybe to kind of, at least in my view, wrap up some of the discussion that we had is, when we think about AI, we think about three buckets: precognition, cognition, postcognition. That precognition space is really the sensing space, which is overwhelmingly what agriculture has been focused on. The blue ocean opportunity is this technology space we call cognition, about really facilitating deep decision making and domain expertise. We spoke about the grower having, today's grower having to actually fill 9 or 10 shoes, right? And a lot of information today is embedded in kind of different parts of the value chain, whether that be at the seed company or the chemical company. Now, the wonderful opportunity from a grower perspective is for somebody to come in and build these kind of deep AI cognition systems that actually puts knowledge at their fingertips. So when I gave the description earlier, kind of that fighter cockpit type thing, that's the type of technology I'm describing. So most people at this point are familiar with ChatGPT. Not that I want to get completely anchored to that, but that gives you a vision what's possible. And if you think forward 4 or 5 years, because that type of technology is its complete infancy. Really bringing this broad, deep domain expertise to the grower's fingertips, I think, is going to be transformational. And the person and or company or whoever does that is, in my view, going to be a hero.
Definitely. Thank you for expanding on that. Since we have a little bit of extra time, I would love to take some audience questions. So to start, we had one from Ashley Robinson. Are there any ag sectors where we shouldn't use tech, or that tech has gone wrong?
Well, I'll take that. I mean, I'll start and I'll let my colleagues build on it. I mean, should we not use tech? I mean, change is inevitable. I think, how, it's everybody's responsibility to figure out how to manage and integrate that change in a responsible way. Okay. Is tech gone wrong? Again, I would kind of go about that a little differently. I don't think anybody develops technology or products with some type of, sinister view. We're living in a complex world. I mean, whether it's technology or finance, it doesn't matter what segment of the economy it is. There's always unintended, consequences to things that people cannot, that are impossible to foresee. So, we need to we need to develop things responsibly, ethically. Are there going to be unintended consequences occasionally? It's unavoidable, and I think that's an artifact of progress. And welcome the comments from my peers.
Yeah, I would agree that I'd say the one thing that you can't ignore is that it's the job of our farmers and our industry to feed the world, and the growing population and the growing wealth of that population and their awareness of the health of their food and what they want in it, what they don't want it. These are all problems that we're asked to solve. Emission reductions and food logistics, and there's so many levels here. There's no way you can not leverage technology and keep up with the appetites. And I think, there's a lot of naivety that food comes from grocery stores for a lot of people, but to look behind that and say, where does our food come from? There's a big challenge right now that says in a market where our farmland is actually decreasing because of urban sprawl, and we're being handcuffed in a lot of the innovations because it just hasn't been tested enough yet, or there's not enough comfort level with it yet. We have to leverage technology at every given opportunity, and I think we do have a lot of ethics in our industry compared to other industries I've dabbled in, and there is a great culture around emission reduction and building the soil and making healthy food and getting it to the consumers, in a presentable format on time and everything like that. Great culture, great ethics, and the companies that I've worked for have, invested a huge amount of money on being ethical and inclusive and all these different aspects you might judge a company by. So, but yeah, like Joseph said, when you're moving quickly and trying to improve and leveraging this stuff, it doesn't always go as planned. It's a complex, biodiverse system. So yeah, there are learnings along the way, but I think the industry is very quick to take those learnings and adapt.
Yeah, I think those are two well said answers, in that it's a journey of continuous improvement that we're working on, and as long as we continue to view it in that with that perspective, we have a tall task in front of us, and technology is an important part of that.
Definitely. Well, thank you for taking that audience question and for taking all of my questions. I really appreciate you all joining us this week for Seed Speaks, and I enjoyed learning so much and sharing this information and expertise with our audience. Next week on Seed Speaks, join Mark to learn about malt barley adoption and beer. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great week.